So this is a Creality Ender 5. There's Ender 2s, Ender 3s, Ender 3 Pros, Ender 4s, Ender 5s, Ender 5 Pluses, Ender, or I don't think it's Ender anymore, then it just goes to like CR10 and then like CR10 V2 and CR20. Anyways, Creality makes a ton of printers. And this is just one of them. You could buy any of them, and they all have varying features and varying prices. But this one is a pretty good value for price, I think, and it's my first 3D printer, and who knows, maybe it'll be yours. So I figured I'd do a video on it because a lot of people want to see a printer in action, and not only that, but like a printer somebody like me or you or anybody that's making the video, but a printer that has been used for a while, that's not just built and has, you know, like the test print or whatever. So I've had this printer, I don't know, 3 months. It's not boding well. I'm not good with dates. I've had it a couple months, and I've printed, I don't know, decent amount. There's some spools I've already gotten rid of, but those I haven't printed yet. This white's nearing completion. I'm actually really debating if this is going to have enough filament or not. I don't think it will, but it'll be at least, I don't know, 70-80%, which is kind of good enough, because then I'm going to do it again with a full spool, even bigger, because I already think this is coming out. I'm kind of anyways, I'm getting distracted. Possibly your first printer. It's my first printer. So how is it? I got it for $320 on Amazon. I've printed at least, I don't know, 200 hours on it, maybe, if I'm kind of guesstimating cure times. I've had tons of failed prints, just gonna be honest. Failed prints is part of 3D printing. I kind of think you have failures no matter what, unless you're just, I don't know, some genius. But I've also had a lot of really good prints that have encouraged me to keep going despite the failures. And it's encouraging when you get a good print that comes out. This light is like too bright. I don't want to mess up this print. Just checking it. Oh yeah, looks cool. But most of my failures started with bed adhesion, which it's not really a problem with this printer. It just comes down to slicing in your software settings and how you want to do the type of adhesion. So there's a big learning curve with this particular printer when it comes to using the slicing software that it comes with. That initially discourages me from recommending it for being a first-time printer. A ton of people, I think, have the idea that you can just download the file, the STL or whatever, from the internet, plug it into your printer, hit print, and it just comes out. And that's just not the case. There's tons of stuff you have to do in the software, and there's tons of stuff that you have to make sure is right for this printer in the software, otherwise it will not come out right. So I've messed with things like coasting and retraction and printer speed and bed temperature, nozzle temperature, literally everything in Cura I've tweaked from the default whatever profile that came with this printer. The only things that came out right were the test prints that came on the factory SD card. Those came out fine because they're super easy prints. As soon as you want to do anything with an overhang or anything remotely complicated, you should see my first Benchy. I should have had it out for the video. It's somewhere buried. My first Benchy looked like trash. Probably a day or two later, it came out really good. So it's been a lot of tweaking and a lot of learning. So if you're not on board for Googling and joining the Facebook group and, lots of YouTube tutorials, If that sounds too complicated, then I would not recommend this type of printer as your first printer. You need something that's more click and print. That I can't really recommend anything because I haven't used another printer, but I know there are much more simple printers out there that don't require as much tinkering as this one does. However, if that type of thing intrigues you, as it did me, and learning excites you, I would recommend this as your first printer because it's only around, I think you can get them as cheap as, if you find a super cheap deal, you might be paying like $250 brand new, but more realistically, it's going to be around $300 new. I wonder, I have no idea how loud this printer is. Maybe I should hold my hand this way. You can catch more of my voice, maybe. So yeah, maybe 250 to 300. I paid around 320 a couple months ago. I mean, prices scale. Plus I think it's because the 5 Plus came out right after I bought this, so this one then went a little bit cheaper. But at $300, it's a super good deal. And anything you see right now with this printer that looks different than the way it came from the factory, I've printed it on this printer. It's not really been a purchase. Okay, that's not really true. This red extruder I purchased, and this blue Bowden tube I purchased. But all the other changes, this I printed, these clips I printed, those things I printed, the frame supports down there I printed, that big base that the extruder's sitting on I printed, these white bases I printed, the cooler I printed. It's all stuff that you can make to improve the printer. On the oh yeah, and the base for the Wise Cam that watches it I printed, although I did not print the camera. And that to me has been the most fun part, honestly, has been improving the printer. But other than that, I've had a ton of cool prints. I'm still debating if I'm going to show you all of them because they're in my room, and my room is not really prepped to be on YouTube. My closet is because it's small. But I printed the collapsible lightsaber. I've printed like tons of little complex cube things that I can't remember the shape of. I printed movable chainmail that's kind of flexible, that's really cool. All kinds of articulated face huggers, and just a lot of stuff that came out really good. Maybe initially it didn't come out good, but then I slowly learned and tweaked, and that has been really fun and encouraging. One thing I will say is the manual bed leveling on this, it's a little bit, I won't say finicky. Like, I only have to do it maybe once every, I don't know, I do it once every week, which is probably too often. But I check it at least once every week and make sure that the nozzle has not moved or come unscrewed or, changed from the bed height. But a lot of people invest in the BL touches and the auto bed leveling, and maybe that stuff works. But I'd say like 9 out of 10 posts I see about auto bed leveling, it's because it's not working. And this is just a super simple way to do it with the knobs and a piece of paper. Try not to knock the printer while it's running. I just use let's see, this is my little collection of tools and whatnot for the printer. But yeah, the nozzle just sits on there and you run a piece of paper underneath it, and then you adjust the knobs. That has worked for me for everything. I usually use a brim. I can use a skirt on things that have a really wide footprint, but I still try not to because I've had prints fail like 80% of the way through because it came undone. And when you do a brim, there's much less chance of that. Basically almost no chance of that. I did initially start on rafts, and there's nothing wrong with rafts other than they take a ton of time, and they take a ton of more plastic. So it's just kind of wasting your time and your plastic. It does guarantee, I think, that your print's not going to move, but if you can get this bed leveled right, which I think you can if you did like I did here and use glass and the magnetic bed, and it doesn't move because there's still the adhesive layer too, so the magnetic bed is like you know, stuck there. Anyways, if you do that, it kind of guarantees that your magnetic bed is going to be flat on the glass. And then your prints, like this, it's really wide and narrow. But it's going to stick. Like, it's probably going to be kind of hard to get it off. Like, whenever I flex the bed, it usually takes quite a lot of flex before it breaks that seal. It's a really good seal. So you can get it printing right without auto bed leveling, without BL touch, without any of that. One other thing I'll say is this does not have an auto bootloader. This is running like, I actually don't know. I think it's running Marlin 1.16 or something like that. Whatever it came from the factory. So as far as I know, it does not have thermal runaway protection enabled, which is a big no-no, and a bunch of people will be like, ah, in the comments or whatever. But I watch it, and I have a camera watching it, and I don't know. It's run for, like I said, hundreds, or at least 150, 200 hours at this point. And it's not caught fire. So, I don't plan on updating the firmware. If it's not broken, don't fix it, right? And right now it's not broken. It's printing great. And everything I've seen about updating the firmware without a bootloader, it's a pain in my fucking ass. Sorry for my language, but I've done the Arduino build, and I've compiled the firmware, and I've got it to that point, but I don't want to buy anything to update the firmware. If it can't just be plugged into the computer and done, if I have to like buy a Raspberry Pi or something, even if it's like $10, I'm kind of opposed to doing it. Like I said, if it's not broken, I don't really want to change it. Updating the firmware would be nice to be on like the most current version of Marlin, but at that point, I think I'm just going to buy a new printer. They're so cheap, and they're so accessible, and there's so many of them, and there's so much more to learn. I think I would just buy a new printer that has a bootloader, that has a ton more features that this printer doesn't have, and then I'll just start with that one. And I think I would still keep the Ender 5, even if I got a brand new printer, because, like I said, it's running great. I'm really excited for this lithophane to come out. It's I'll have to post, I don't know, maybe a link in the comments, post a link with the finished product, but I think it's a 31-hour print, so there's no way I can finish it in this video. So yeah, if you're still watching, you're amazing, and thank you, because I've kind of just been rambling at this point. I really didn't have any direction for this video. But maybe overall you've got a good idea for the sound of this printer. I've just been in my closet. It's a very small room. I keep it in here with the door closed because the sound is a little bit annoying. But it's great in here, and when I'm in here, it's not overbearing. You can do a ton of upgrades like silent stepper drivers. Like I said, you could spend a ton of money and change a bunch of stuff, but I'm kind of down with all of the free mods with the printing stuff and just keeping it as kind of as factory but modded for free as I can, if that makes any sense. I didn't mention a couple things. I did put TL smoothers on it. It does have TL smoothers, so that's kind of an upgrade people consider that I didn't really mention. I never ran it without it. As when I first bought it, I put the TL smoothers on before I even like turned it on for the first time. I installed them, as well as the aluminum extruder. I never printed with the factory one. In fact, it's still in here in the bag somewhere. Oh, there's an extra smoother. But yeah, I never used this factory extruder arm. The upgrade of the Capricorn tube and the stainless steel fittings was super necessary. It's one of the most important updates, I think, for most Creality default cheapo hot ends. The silent auto home mounts are a nice upgrade. This extruder being mounted here instead of over here on the side down there is actually kind of a pretty big improvement, I think, because then you shorten your Bowden tube, which reduces the amount of friction that your extruder motor has to deal with, and overall it makes your flow rate and your E-steps more accurate, which makes your print more accurate, which is amazing. Like, you want all the details and all the accuracy when you're printing. So for this model, these supports are kind of important. I had a lot of vibration in the bed when the nozzle was moving fast and printing. The bed, you could see it was like, and then the nozzle would end up like hitting the print sometimes because the bed would be shaking. So these supports get rid of all of that. Like I said, the glass bed and the supports add all that extra weight though, so then your bed will fall, which is very annoying. So then you're gonna need this little shim, and a lot of people do different things. They put a bearing in there, like a skateboard bearing, with a slightly different file, but I like the paper shim. It's super cheap. It's basically free if you have paper. I drilled it out slightly oversized, and then I stuck the paper in there, and then boom, it's like the perfect amount of friction. And you might think, oh, it's too much friction, it's going to stop the bed from going up and down, but it doesn't. I've printed, I don't know, at least a dozen prints since I've installed that, and a lot of them have gone at least halfway down, and there's no like issues with the layers or like layer shifting or anything because of the friction on the rod. It's really the perfect amount of tension. The bullseye is a super necessary mod, I think. You're gonna have cooling issues with the factory, with this factory thing. It's not great for cooling. You might notice, like, especially on overhangs, you'll get some cooling issues, but then it does really good everywhere else. That was one of my earlier prints. But you can print really cool stuff. These are some, I put this on the extruder arm, whatever, the extruder gear to turn it, and this was just a fun one, an R2D2 guy. This was my old cooler. You can see the small fan goes there, the bigger fan goes there, and then those are the mounts. It worked pretty good. This was a bitch to install. You have to like take one of the wheels off and like take the hot end off, like a bunch of stuff that you don't have to do to get that one on. So while I thought the cooling was superior, I really think the bullseye is better. Better, simpler, easier to adjust, more robust. I don't know, I'm in love with the bullseye. This is like a calibration extrusion test. Single wall. And there's an even smaller one that I dropped on the floor. Itty bitty boy. So there's just a couple, I don't know. I have way cooler prints in my room, but like I said, it's not ready for YouTube. So yeah, I should end this because it's way too long, and I said that earlier. But thanks for watching. Creality Ender 5.